As we begin today, I want to acknowledge that I am located in Lloydminster on the border of Alberta and Saskatchewan in the heart of Treaty 6 territory. Before the arrival of the explorers and settlers, many First Nations traveled through and thrived in this area, which also includes the homeland of the Métis. I was born here, but I chose to return here as an adult. And now, after unlearning what I was taught in public school in the 1970s and 1980s, and relearning a less whitewashed history of this place, I see this land and its stories through very different eyes. I acknowledge that the roots of my family on the prairies came at the cost of the First Nations people who were here long before. Their land was taken so that my ancestors could farm and build their lives in this place that became known as Canada. I cannot change the past, but I can try to move forward in a good way by sharing what I've learned about the Indigenous peoples whose teachings are so intricately tied to this land and all it encompasses. For 10 years, I have listened and tried to capture Mr. Fine stories. I guess that has been my small role in helping him to continue to move mountains. I've been blessed with various teachings, residential school memories, historical accounts, ancient stories, and funny incidences. Many stories have been shared repeatedly, so I do retain some in my memory. However, I have filled many pages of notes over the years. Some stories have been recorded for personal and family use. Some are now making their way to a broader audience through this podcast. I truly believe that Wes is his own best storyteller, so recording this series with video as well as audio is the most authentic way of capturing his stories. Along the way, I hope I have helped to make things right, even just a little. Mr. Fine is sharing stories as he knows and has experienced them, which may differ from those told within other Indigenous communities and settler institutions. Throughout the series, we discuss various plants and traditional healing methods. This is not intended to replace medical advice from trained healthcare providers. Some episodes contain graphic descriptions of events witnessed and experienced by the guest at his time in residential school and at various points throughout his life. They may spark memories and questions, so we are asked to listen with open hearts and minds. Viewer discretion is advised. I'm reminded of, I think it was the summer of 2019, and I had come out to see you, and we went to North Battleford, and we went to Fort Battleford, and
yes.
we visited the fort and the Frog Lake Massacre burial site. But you weren't very...
That was a burial, the mass grave.
The mass grave, yes.
Below Fort Battleford.
That's right. But you weren't very mobile then.
No, I couldn't. I could barely move.
Yeah. We had you in a scooter that day, and we scooted around. And I always said that was a very fine day. We had a beautiful day out. But one of the things, and I can picture, we stood on your steps, and it was probably the weakest that I had seen you physically.
Mm-hmm.
And you said, we have work to do, and we need to do something with these stories.
Well.
And then I told you that day, and I hadn't told you this before, but in those first year or so when we met, and you had come to visit me here at the college, and you had just shown up one day. You were driving through town, and you popped in, and you had so many things to tell me, and it was pay attention to your dreams and watch for colors, and what about the little people? And you had so much to tell me. And while we were standing there talking, there was this voice, and this voice said, "You will write his story." And it was this external voice somewhere up in the sky that I heard and I felt, and I had never told you that, but I would try to process, well, what does that mean? Mm-hmm. And I knew you were a writer. You have children who are writers, And so what did this mean to write your story? And so for years I've written down notes, and as we've talked and I've made notes. And
And
then
that's a book.
yeah.
That's a book my children couldn't write, because my experience, with them is totally different. I've never focused on the challenges I've had to face. And in fact, when I finally did, I took Max to Edmonton to this meeting with these people. And I sat and I talked to them. And when we came out, Max wrote about that, and that he had never actually thought about all the challenges that I had had to face to get to be where I was. And he said, you've had to move mountains, and you never gave up. You never gave up. You never gave in. And I'm so proud of that, he said, that you were one of the ones that they couldn't break. They broke me. I just didn't show up. And that was part of it, yeah.
And so just to clarify, that's when the Truth and Reconciliation Commission was going across Canada collecting residential school survivor stories.
Mm-hmm.
And you went and
I
shared
went
your
and
story.
I talked to them, and, I told them about the insane people that worked in those places and the expectations, the demands they had of us, and, the treatment we received if we didn't move fast enough, or if we weren't quiet enough, or, whatever reason they could find, to turn their anger on us. And that's what Max said. I never ever really thought of that, but that you had such mountains to move just to survive. Yeah. And in those times, 50s, 60s, and 70s, I was in the bush with my teacher. And when I was cut loose from him and moved to the city, I met all kinds of Indians on the street. There was people, who were into gangs and movements, and, but nothing I could get personally involved in. I had been there, done that, and, I just got to the point where I saw all this dysfunctionality that was going on, and the people that were getting hurt were the people that were right in there. It reminds me of a friend I had who was working as a bouncer in a bar. He didn't drink, but he worked as a bouncer because that's the only skill he had. And he got stabbed in the gut. And someone came running over and helped him up and said, "We got to get you to a hospital." And he was telling, "No, don't worry about this." He said, "I'll live through this." And he died on the way to the hospital. It wasn't the first time he'd been knifed, Yeah. But just all the harm that it did. And then, you're damaged. You need healing. You need treatment. Well, what is it? For me, I couldn't trust doctors. I couldn't trust policemen. I couldn't trust social workers. I mean, I had reached out to all of these organizations, and I even put in an application to join the army because, I had to get some skills, and I thought maybe if I go in the army, they'll put me through some training courses but then didn't matter what kind of training I had at that point. I was still brown, and that wasn't going to change. So I wasn't going to be able to get any work that was meaningful. I would always be offered things that nobody else wanted to do. Or they couldn't find anyone else to do. And it would have been quite easy at that point to give up and say, okay, you've beat me. I give up. I'll tap out. But I kept, refusing to admit that I was defeated. No, I'm going to get up. I ain't whipped yet. I ain't whipped yet, But that came at a cost for sure. Yeah. And now, I have my stories, and I have my the things that I want to share. I mean, I've traveled this trail, and I have my memories, I have my dreams, I have my hopes, I have my faith. And that's what pulled me through. That's what brought me from that place to the present, where it's no longer a foregone conclusion that I have no place anywhere. So, for me, it was always trying to create a space for myself. I need a space. I need, yeah. But I have no resources. All I have is my faith, my hope, my dreams, and my body. But I can't get my foot in the door anywhere, and when I did, I mean, I would usually last a year or two until they began to undermine my integrity by saying, well, this is what we want you to say. This is what we want you to tell the people when they come to Âsokan, Or this is what we want you to say about the museum and the artifacts there. And, for instance, finding 500 sets of human remains in the museum annex. What are these doing here? And it was the spirits that took down the covering when we were in there. They just, that plastic rolled off, and all of a sudden there's all these rows of boxes. And I asked that archaeologist, what are those? Human remains, he said. They're all boxed up and stored here. That's why that big tarp was, so nobody would see them, he said. Don't know why it fell down just now when we came in. Because they require attention.
Yeah.
Those bones require ceremony. And now I've seen them. And now people will be hearing about them. And so they quickly made a plan to go and rebury all those bones at Âsokan. But at least they got them out of the annex. And, I was, is that enough? Are you satisfied? Or did you return the grave goods? Grave goods? Well, of course there was grave goods there when you guys dug up those bones. I mean, where'd all those pipes and drums and, bones and things come from? I mean, they're funerary objects, And the more recent ones, you'll find that the moccasins would be decorated on the soles, because any traveling that deceased person has to do now will be in the spiritual realm, not on the hard ground, That will affect the beadwork on the soles of his moccasins. And I just kept getting led down this pathway, and I was shown the syllabics, the story of the syllabics, and which is currently something I'm working on right now. But there's so much of the stories that have to be shared that there was never the potential to be able to share them in the way that they were meant to be shared, with respect and with dignity and with honor, so that we could all grow from that experience rather than, okay. It's like, I'm a published writer. I tried that. The first material I got published, I refused to let them edit it. Just one word. Can we change "and" to "a"? No. And why would you want to do that? So you can say you edited it, that you made a change, because you're the editor. That's your job, And if you don't change anything, well, you don't get paid, And so that was my conditions. Take them the way they are, or leave them, and I was not paid for those. They told me I would be doing it for the good of my people. But a lot of copies of that material were sold, and I'm sure the proceeds never reached my people. But the stories are there. And it's like the old storytellers, They told stories, they wrote them in syllabics, they left them in certain places with certain people, thinking in the future, young people will be smart like these, and they'll know that system that's in use, and they'll know where to go in search of the things we've left behind, our stories. And when I thought of that, I thought, okay, where could they possibly be? Archives, museums, And that's where I went searching. But then also, I had my own sources, which was the oral historians, the knowledge keepers. And a lot of the stuff, they would have stories about something, and all of a sudden, that story would end. But it would pick up in the book I would read, all of a sudden. Here's the oral part, and all of a sudden it's become documented. It's like Henry Hudson. He got left in Hudson Bay by his crew in a rowboat, and he was never heard of or seen again after his crew went back to London, and they got charged for piracy and stuff because they took his ship and left him. I think they got charged, but Henry Hudson, that was it in the written documentation. But when I was up in Peawanuck, which is James Bay, right next to Hudson Bay, I was there on tour telling stories, and I made a point of asking who were the knowledge keepers in that community. And I went to visit one old man, and he had a lot of the ancient stories because they're so isolated up there, eh? But he also had this story, he was telling me, because I was on my way to visit him, and I saw these Indians that had really curly black hair and blue eyes. And so when I was talking with him, I mentioned that, boys, some of these guys have blue eyes and really curly black hair. And he said, you know what happened there? About 300 years ago, he said. Our stories tell us that our people who were camped along the shores of the water here, they found a boat on the beach, and these white men that had washed up with it. There was, I think, 4 of them. Well, they took them into their camp and fed them and dried them off and treated them. And they stayed with them in the community, and those men took wives and began to have kids, eh? And that's where those blue eyes and curly black hair came from. It was from those sailors that got washed ashore here. And I was thinking 300 years ago, 1700s, who would have been sailing around it? And I was in a second-hand store one day, and I saw this book, Henry Hudson. Oh, picked it up, started reading it, and, then I read that he had been lost and, never... He just disappeared after they took his ship and left him there. And then I started thinking, and yet these stories say that he didn't die, that he became part of that community. And I was thinking, now we have the technology that, we could, those, have that DNA checked with DNA in England and probably find their relatives, Henry Hudson's relatives might be among them. Yeah. But how fast the technology changes, eh? And more and more things start to come to the surface for us to see and to think about.
Well, and I think it's fairly well accepted idea in history that the history is written by the winner, the victor.
Mm-hmm.
Often that winner is a white colonial male.
Yeah.
And that's been the voice and the stories that many of us grew up with in our traditional educations. But now some of these other stories are resurfacing or being told in different ways, and people are paying attention and asking questions. And, well, maybe it wasn't quite like that.
And then you begin to see the differences, the discrepancies in a story. And it's like when I was talking the other evening to Dean, and he was talking about an exhibition, but we don't have the Indigenous voice in there, and that's what's missing here. And we've been trying to make it our mission to be included, and for our story to become part of that story, not just have one, because a lot of the material, if you just examine, for instance, the field notes of the early researchers and the published works, you begin to see how processed the published works are. and that they have been inspected and approved and, taken apart, eviscerated, put back together, and then approved as something, that you can teach your children.
They've been whitewashed.
Yeah, yeah. They've had the soul taken out of them, is what I said to Dean. They have no life. They just want facts and figures, because all they have is their primitive technology to help them to define, and they can build machines that will tell you, 1 and 1 is 10, Doesn't make it so, but they have the technology to build all kinds of stuff like that to prove what they want to have proven, And so even with that, you have to take that with, okay, who's doing this and why are they doing it? Because they always do it for a reason. It's never, oh, well, something needs to be done to clean the earth. I think I'll said about inventing something to gather garbage or something, It's always, we made this such a dump. Now who's left to clean it up? Who's going to make it better? And there are lots of people who see the need for action, but they lack the resources. They don't have any resources. A lot of times, people have, it's like, you know what's wrong, but you can't do anything about it. Yeah. Can be pretty frustrating to the point where you could quit caring. I'll just do my job and never mind anything else, But when we do it like that, then so many people suffer. That could have been better off, that could have been helped, but weren't. Because of some deficiency in resources or a process or vision, recognition. And it's so interesting, we talk about, for instance, COVID. And, there is a spirit that said, I am called Âsokan, sickness. I am called sickness. And periodically, I am summoned from my place. And I am instructed to travel about all over the earth to check upon the state of things. And if there are imbalances, it is my job to restore the balance. And how I do that, I carry sickness with me. So when you sense me approaching, it said, don't look for me. I'll be in the sky. Don't look for me. And stay away from a water's edge. And if you live near there, move back into the bushes that don't have incredibly tall trees, but just medium-sized trees. And isolate yourself in that place for the time that I am traveling the earth. Sometimes a year, but it would be epidemics, that would happen. And, that would be to restore the balance of the earth. And now I keep thinking, that guy's got to come. he's going to be showing up. There's so much. I mean, when I think about the numbers of people and, you know, how they're also dependent, not on themselves, but on animals and plants and everything else, but they don't, they're not growing them. They're not going to these barren places and planting things. You know, I was reading an article before I fell asleep last night about this guy, and it showed a picture of a valley that was just dirt. And this old man, and in the next picture, I mean, there's this picture of this old man, and he's standing in front of that valley, and that valley is full of trees. He planted them. Let's see. And when you plant a tree, it's important to leave it there for a long time, to get used to its environment and to become familiar with its neighbors. Because, you know, you have a grove of trees, they have a language, they have a dialect that they speak, which might be different from a grove of trees just further down the road, which also share a language, but they're connected by this, it's a fungus in the ground. And all of these things, they use it to transmit information to each other, you know, through the earth. And there's other ways too, like when a tree is in distress because it's being attacked by something, whether it's bugs or worms or whatever, then it will put out a smell. And the trees beside it will also put out that smell, that odor, which will go into the air and which will be smelled by the birds that, you know, they will know that there's a feast in this part of the forest, because these trees are saying, you know, there are bugs or worms here and they're trying to kill us, and will you come and help? And so the birds will come, you know, and they'll help the trees like that. So they all communicate. There's different forms, some through the air and some through that gigantic fungus. They say it stretches around the earth, that one. And so the earth is always conscious of itself, and the things around it. But who would suspect? Who would know these things, you know? And when you damage a part of it, I mean, it'll repair itself, but it will know it's been damaged, you know? And it will become aware. Well, who did this? And for what? You know? Well, next time that they come walking through here, just put a stump in the way, you know, or something. Or else they can hide. And it's like these funguses, you know. You can go to a willow grove. Might be funguses all over the willows, but you won't see them. Take your tobacco. Give that willow a smoke. Say, you come in a sacred manner. I come seeking medicine for life. I come seeking the teardrop. Put your tobacco down by the willows and then stand back and listen. And if that fungus is there and it's ready to come with you, it will whistle, and you will hear that whistle. Your ears will hear it. And it's just to determine, okay, that whistle came from this way, I'll start walking that way. And often, when you get close to it, you'll start finding, what the hell was that hole I fell in? What's this big tree doing in my way, you know? And just you have to earn. You have to be motivated enough to have the energy to go and get that. And, often a little punch from the bottom and it'll lift up and just come off, eh? Yeah. Or else something like a knife or something put between it and the tree, and then you can take it. But that one, I mean, it's good for headaches. That's one of the things. But with other medicines, I mean, it's good for, stomach issues and stuff like that. My grandmother used to use that a lot for that. And then just by itself as a smudge, and a smudge that you can take up your nose to clear your sinuses and remove your headache and all of that. All of these old medicines and how they were used is being forgotten. It's because we have such easy access to pills, I guess. A lot easier to go and get a pill than to go and find a fungus.
I keep thinking of a couple times as we've been talking, I'm reminded of the first day that we spent out on the land. And we drove out through the country and we were picking medicines and we were telling stories. But we came to kind of a creek and there was the beaver lodge. And we were picking the beaver grass mint. And I remember thinking, I didn't know that mint grew in the wild. But it was like once you showed it to me, well, then I kept seeing it. It was there. And it had always been there.
That's right.
But I had never paid attention.
You didn't recognize it.
Yeah.
And recognition is such an important aspect of connecting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Recognition in terms of physical body, but intellectual recognition and emotional recognition and spiritual recognition. You see, there's all those different components, and they're all tied together. They're all connected.
And the beaver showed herself to us that day too, came out and they poked their heads out.
Yeah, she had no fear. She knew that we weren't there to do any harm and that we were simply there to gather medicines. So she came and acknowledged us by coming to the shore and then going back. Yeah.
And I said for the longest time I could, because I dried that medicine and I had a special jar for it, and I would open that jar and that scent would just fill my head and it would just take me back to that day.
Yeah.
The power of, I guess, that sensory memory, that sense of smell.
Yeah. There's so many things that your sense of smell will trigger that you either are aware of or you're not aware of, but you should be aware of. Yeah. Like, I smelled something. What was that? I should know what that is, and where did that come from? And all of these things too, like the medicines, the way that you approach them and to speak to them, it's important, to approach and stand still and explain to this plant what it is you're doing. I come in a sacred manner. I am a child of Creator. I come seeking help for sicknesses. I come seeking health and good life. And don't be offended if I take some of these ones that grow near here or with you, because I will remember them. I will remember their gift, and I will remember you in stories, and I will teach my children about you, so that you are always part of who we were and who we are.
I think that's one of the things I've learned from you, right? It's that heightened awareness and pay attention, and we're all connected. And say hello to the birds. And I have a favorite tree where I make offerings. And I don't know, the crazy old bird lady who talks to the birds and the trees.
Yeah,
But there's something to be said for that.
absolutely.
It's a connection.
It's about relationships. And, the ones that you recognize, a lot of people might not.
So one of the things that we were talking about, this idea of writing. And so for me, to write your story was WRITE, write it down. My background is English literature. I like to write. I've always read and wrote and then dreamed and imagined stories. But I guess I've come to think about that in a different way. And, we had that conversation. There's different types of writing. And I guess, one of the things I hope is maybe in our conversations and through our friendship and our connections, maybe we've made some things right. RIGHT, right.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we've made some things right.
And I think, part of why you were placed on this path is because you were seeking and you were already listening. You see. And I was looking. I was the one looking for the listeners and the watchers. You see. When I was sent out as a young man, I was out scouting, looking over the land, looking at the people, the animals, and what is the state of things, and where do I go, and what do I have to do, because I know that there are things I have to do. Let it be what I should be doing, not what I want to be doing. Yeah. And that, was part of this process of stories. Learning to listen is to develop your conscious awareness, so that when you look around, you're not just with open eyes not seeing anything, but you begin to notice things. Again, landmarks, or things that are familiar, or things that point direction, guidance. And it's like that. I don't know if I told you that story of how after I left my teacher and I ended up in a city, and I was in a situation where I had to go back to find my teacher, and I relied on the birds to show me. And anywhere that a bird came and crossed my path and flew in a certain direction, that usually happened where there was crossroads. I would go the way the bird wanted me to go. And I found my teacher like that. But he's the one who had said, I need the fifth feather from the right wing of an owl. And I want you to go and get me one. I had no idea of what an adventure that was going to be. I thought, okay, I'll borrow a 22, I'll go and find an owl, and never mind the fifth feather, I'll bring the whole bird. That should impress him. And it didn't. I came back with a feather. after running into 4 owls sitting on top of the trees in the forest. And when I offered them tobacco and asked them to help me, and I was on a journey seeking something from my teacher, and threw that tobacco up and looked up, and there was those feathers. And they came and they landed right at my feet, the ones that I needed. And you know, moments like that were the moments in my life where I thought, okay, there's something to this. I'm not just imagining. I'm not just hoping, you know. They are listening. They are watching. And how that became, it became something that I could call on and rely on. I knew that, you know, if I need help, okay, I'll ask the birds. And sometimes they leave me feathers, and I'll gladly accept them. And always thinking, these I'll make into something someday when it comes. Or someone will make something out of these. That will be powerful. And you know, where like the thoughts that you think, they'll fly through the air. And especially when you wear those clothes with those things on it, which transform you from who you are, taking that plus adding you're part animal, part bird now, because you earned that relationship, eh? And you can depend on it, you can rely on it. And there's nothing I do, I don't think, that doesn't involve the birds somehow. Just simply affirmation, you know. I mean, leaving town, there's a big eagle waiting for me, you know. Leaving Sweetgrass, a little one, which shocked me because I thought baldies aren't that small. They can't be that small. What's this guy doing with a bald head, you know, with a white head? It can't be an immature white eagle or a bald eagle because there's got to be 4 before they start to change. And when they're 4, they're much bigger than that, you know. So it had me thinking, and so because I was thinking and wondering, I was paying attention to all the other, what else is out here, you know. And then the other one showed up, and then the coyote. Okay. We're off on another sacred mission, are we?
When you came to visit the college and you spoke to students for 2 days and you blessed our Indigenous Student Lounge, you sang the spirits in. We had a beautiful 2 days, and my coworker and I sent you off and said farewell and came back upstairs and looked out the window, and he was, and he's pointing, and I didn't know what. And there was an eagle circling outside of campus. And I'd never seen an eagle on campus. We're in the middle of town. It's April, and there's an eagle circling. And we ran outside, and we were so excited. And I think you told me that on your way home, you also received a song that day. As you were driving away, a song had come to you too.
Mm-hmm.
And so some days I think, you know, when I wonder is, you know, am I doing the right thing, and what should I do, and what does this all mean? And sometimes I think of those incidences and those times, and I'm just reminded, yeah, right? This is good work. This is a good place. Yeah, we're doing the right thing, and we're blessed. We're watched over in this space.
And whatever transpires out of this, it's going to be powerful, and it's going to affect people. they will be moved by it, and hopefully moved enough to begin to change their own lives, to make this world a better place.
Thank you for joining us. We look forward to continuing these conversations. Thank you to Mr. Fine for his time and stories. Special thanks to the Lloydminster Public School Division Prairie Thunder Boys Drum Group for providing the music for our podcast. We also want to acknowledge Lakeland College for the use of space and equipment, as well as TELUS STORYHIVE for their support.